right? Then two people are blind. Perfectly just. And yet it's the perpetuation of harm. So, when we experience evil, it hurts. Remember my definition? Evil entails suffering. Active or passive allowance of harm. Evil hurts. When we are experiencing harm from someone else, we turn to that person to plead our case and to ask them to cease the evil. As the suffering mounts, as the evil action against us mounts, or as it increases in intensity or frequency, so too do we need to make it stop, right? We get desperate after a little while. We want this pain or this suffering, this neglect, this injustice, whatever you want to call it, to stop. And so we turn to the person who's causing it, and we plead for succor. We plead for it to stop. Things get really complicated. Because sometimes we don't know who to plead. For example, who is responsible for the misogyny or misandry you've suffered? Okay, misogyny being bigotry towards women, misandry, bigotry towards men.
Culture, maybe?
Culture. And it's hard to find a face for the culture. Who do we plead succor from? Like, who do we say, hey, stop treating me this way? You're not treating me fairly as a woman. Like, who specifically do we go to?
Whoever's at the moment causing it.
Exactly, those in the moment, right? And sometimes those closest perpetuate.
I feel like, I don't know, sometimes I've had this kind of dialogue before where I feel like it's usually, I don't know if maybe in your experience, but it tends to be those that are closest to us that seems to perpetuate the most harm versus like those that we might encounter once in a while.
Yeah. No one will break your heart more thoroughly and fully than the one you love the most. You will hurt no one worse than the one you love. The greatest evil are in the most intimate relationships. Yes, ma'am.
Also, maybe you could appeal to people in power, because people in power perpetuate it.
Yes, they do. And so we can appeal to people in power. We can appeal to the face of the other that's harming us, right? So I claim my innocence and suppress the hurt in me and begin by recognizing it and concretizing it, delivering myself from it through the destruction of the evil against me. So I need to destroy this evil that's being perpetuated against me, like sexism. So I talk to leaders, talk to the people who are treating me in a sexist way. It's vague, it's diffuse in many cases. Economic disadvantage, okay? What percentage of the world holds what percent of the wealth? 7 families own what percentage of the wealth in this country alone? You guys get where I'm coming from? So, how do we plead to them? It's not like they're going to hear us out. So what we do is we rid ourselves of the evil in us and make it not me. We put it out there in the world. Hey, this isn't fair, this thing that's happening to me. It's not okay. So one of the things that you'll find when you start working in the prison is they will warn you in your training, everybody will tell you they're innocent. Okay? Nobody will admit, hey, I deserve to be here. That turned out not to be the case. Working in prison, there were the rare men who would say, yeah, actually, I didn't do this crime that I was convicted of. My sentence, my trial, everything was a total sham. However, I did all of these other things. And so, yeah, I'm actually kind of getting off light. If the judge and jury knew all these other things I've done, so yeah, I'm going to spend my 40 years here. Okay? 90% of violent crime is committed by 1% of people. Some people are aware of it. So when I declare myself innocent, hey, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve economic disadvantage. I don't deserve racism. I don't deserve sexism. And of course you don't. But what you do is you then make it not a part of you. And so we then fight as we have been fought against. But then this can put us in an ethical quandary. A backfire is still a fire. So for those of you that know firefighting, sort of wilderness firefighting, there's this big fire and it's roaring towards a town through the forest. So the firefighters get together and start another fire that heads towards the first fire in order to save the town. Fire is fire. So is there a way that I can stand up for and fight for what is right without engaging in the kind of action that causes suffering in other people? It's tricky.
Yes.
Yes, you can. How do you go about it?
You don't perpetuate evil and maybe teach the people around you not to.
You find a way to rehumanize.
You find a way to rehumanize. Because we so want those leaders who are perpetuating economic oppression or racism or misogyny or misandry. We so want them to be jerks and objects. And we so want to treat them like the source of that they are the bad ones, not me. However, one of the first steps in dealing with this humanely is to acknowledge, I'm very angry at this person and I sure want to punch them in the face. I'm going to find a way to feel compassion for them instead. That doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean that we get to give up now. Instead, we get to humble ourselves. Now, exactly. Wait a minute, that's not fair. What about in the case of racism? Right? To ask the people who are oppressed to humble themselves and to try to deal with the very people who are oppressing them? It doesn't make any sense. They should gather together, take up arms, fight, murder, kill. Damn it, Becca, spoiling my fun. Exactly. It's a very good point. So I'm teasing Becca. She's making exactly the point that I'm making. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
But I think that that's why there's such a huge importance for those who, and I'm going to bring up privilege, like those who are in a place of privilege that have the floor, that have the ability to have those conversations, that they take that opportunity to help rehumanize in that sphere. So if you have a leader that has dehumanized an entire people that won't listen to them, because no matter what they do, whether they're taking up arms or they're kneeling at, in silent protest, whatever they do, no one's listening, then someone who is close to them, like that they will listen to, can take that opportunity to find a way to rehumanize to that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if they're aware.
If they're aware, yeah.
Yeah. Can I make someone else take me up as another?
No.
No. Ah! Yes,
It's just being overly passive, the kind of like self-hatred, and I'm not going to fight back because you almost think you deserve it.
Isn't that then dehumanizing
Isn't that
yourself?
standing up for yourself?
Isn't that another form of evil?
That's what I'm saying. So how do you balance the not letting them walk all over you because you have self-hate with the thing come up like that?
I don't know that we can equate not fighting back with self-hate. There's a step there that I can't equivocate those two.
Yeah.
However, can we equate passivity with the allowance of further harm? And the answer is yes. Okay, so skipping ahead because we don't have a whole ton of time left. One of the Buddhas, for those of you that don't know, there are a lot of Buddhas, right? And Buddhism promulgates and argues for radical passivity. Not passivity as in just sitting and doing nothing, but living a very peaceful life, waging peace instead of war. Well, this particular Buddha was on a boat crossing the Great Yangtze River. And while crossing the boat, she knew, her acolytes knew, and the farmers on the boat knew that they were under great threat because there were pirates plying the waters. It was desperate time. So sure enough, their boat is taken over by pirates, and the pirates are disgusted